Good evening, Tanse, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. A 92-year-old former priest was arrested earlier this year in connection to an alleged historical residential school assault. Arthur Massé entered his plea yesterday in a Manitoba courtroom, and Brittany Guillot has more on that.
A former residential school priest entered a plea of not guilty today in Powerview, Pine Falls, Manitoba. Arthur Massé was charged in June with one count of indecent assault. The incident involved a student who was 10 years old at the time. The RCMP say the alleged abuse occurred between 1968 and 1970 at the Fort Alexander Residential School. The allegations of sexual abuse at the institution resurfaced in 2010, sparking a decade-long investigation involving more than 80 officers who gathered 75 witness and victim statements. Victoria McIntosh identified herself as the alleged victim.
And I just talked to one of my relatives here, and we, our mothers are sisters. So we mentioned, this is for our mothers too. And when they couldn't talk and they can only cry. So I come here as their voice as well.
McIntosh isn't the only person to file a complaint against Massé. Marilyn Corshane says she told authorities about the former priest 15 years ago.
He's not taking responsibility for his actions, and he's not being accountable to this community. And yet he was here 40 plus years with our children and our families.
The former priest was absent from the courtroom. Instead, his lawyer phoned in on his behalf.
I think it was, even though I had mentioned in my IAP report that I requested his presence, which is like 15 years ago. He said no. I requested, I did my day school, and I mentioned him in there again, and then nothing again, and then this statement, again, nothing. So that's 3 times I've tried. So it's not working.
Massé worked in several First Nations communities and residential schools across Manitoba and Ontario. His next court date is set for September 14th in Winnipeg. Brittany Guillot, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The Vatican is weighing in today on accusations against Quebec Cardinal Marc Ouellet. Pope Francis says there is not sufficient evidence to open a church investigation into an alleged sex abuse case against Ouellet. A woman has accused the cardinal of sexual assault, and 3 more women have come forward with similar allegations against members of the province's Catholic Church. New legislation in Manitoba has made it easier to crack down on so-called encampments. 2 have been set up near the provincial legislature, including one set up after the findings of suspected unmarked graves in Kamloops in May 2021. Eviction warnings were issued Wednesday morning to those who have been occupying the north and east sides of the legislative building. Sab Jonesa has more.
This is something that they took away from my ancestors, and they're going to do it again to me.
Flags, tents, gardens, and wood for a sacred fire have been seen on the east side of Manitoba's legislative building since May 2021. The encampment was created in response to the findings of unmarked graves at Canada's former residential school sites. Mary Starr, a residential school survivor herself, has been a fixture at this camp since its inception, finding comfort and healing.
And this is where I come and say my prayers for the little ones that didn't make it home. That's why this camp was started.
On Wednesday, organizers were told that their time here is coming to an end.
Just unexpected. Just officers and the police came here yesterday. Wow, they're gonna do this. They're gonna do this to us.
Police and conservation officers came to tell the camp that they have until noon on August 23rd to leave the premises. Part of their reason is due to new legislation passed earlier this year directly in response to encampments, prohibiting them on the basis of safety concerns for staff and tourists.
5 people came here, 5 police came here, and I think 2 police vehicles came there too. It's wow, they're just trying to force us to get out of here.
One of their concerns is of the campers setting fires, something Mary Starr believes is wrong given the ceremonial context.
The sacred fire is not setting a fire. There is a difference. It's a sacred fire, and this is what we do. That's our ways. We come here when we want to say our prayers, and we put our tobacco down, and we say our prayers, and we offer to those little ones that didn't make it home.
A spokesperson for the Manitoba Justice Department says protests and rallies are acceptable on the grounds of the legislative building, but for safety and security reasons, for staff, visitors, tourists, and even other protesters, encampments are not permitted. People here say they will leave once all residential school grounds have been searched and all unmarked graves are found. Until then, Starr says she refuses to leave and will stay until the end.
I'm Treaty 1. This is my territory, and I'm going to remain here. And whatever happens on that day when they come in, I guess whatever, if they use force, then so be it.
Sav Jonza, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
It is being described as a campaign of terror. Forced evictions of those living in a tent city in Vancouver's downtown east side. Indigenous leaders and advocates are calling on the city to stop the sweeps and have accused the Vancouver Police Department of acting violently. For more, we're joined by Anna Cooper, a lawyer with the Pivot Legal Society. Anna, welcome. We really appreciate you taking a few minutes today to speak with us about this.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you tell us when these evictions started and why they're happening?
So starting several months ago, a group of community organizers started pushing the city to stop the daily street sweeps, which is a practice we see in many municipalities of pushing homeless people along every day. And at a certain point, the local police department pulled out of those sweeps, and then the city refused to keep cleaning up the block. And after that, people started to have some stability, but also the city was no longer providing resources to help people keep their spaces clean and organized. So that's essentially how this got started. And at that point, community organizers really pushing the municipality, the province, and other actors to support community-led safety. But instead of that, we saw this fire order ordering everyone to leave.
And the evictions have been described as a, quote, campaign of terror to decamp the tent city, end quote. Has there been any violence?
Well, there have been a number of violent arrests of people both living in that community and advocates supporting them on their behalf. And I think something that's important to note is even if an individual unhoused person isn't being violently arrested in this moment, when you tell somebody that their choices are to be evicted to nowhere or face the ultimate threat of VPD, violent arrest, and the seizure and destruction of all their possessions, that is inherently violent, whether it is happening to every person in this moment or it is just the acts constantly hanging over their heads. And you can feel that stress on the ground.
So what's the latest on the evictions today?
So the latest that I've heard, and I'm not sure if there's been something in the last couple of hours, is that there isn't a lot of communication coming to folks on the ground at this time. So things have slowed down a little bit. We're not seeing the same force and push against people every day. But nor have people been given any reassurances that the government or the fire department are going to move forward in a different way with people.
Anna, what are the people's rights here?
So there's a number of rights that are implicated anytime we're talking about evicting people to nowhere. There are the rights people have under the charter to have their safety and security of the person protected. There's good case law showing that constantly evicting people puts them in extreme risk of both physical and psychological harm. There's harms under local human rights codes concerning the rights to not be discriminated against. And obviously, as all your viewers will know, unhoused folks are overwhelmingly members of marginalized groups that are protected, including Indigenous folks and people with disabilities. And then there's all the rights that the Canadian state has signed on to but repeatedly refuses to actually uphold in international law that have regards to their rights to safety and security in their housing and while being outside, and rights to not be force evicted.
And lastly here, we're seeing evictions of unhoused peoples right across the country. Anna, what do you think is behind that?
I mean, ultimately, this issue goes back to colonization. It goes back to the history of genocide and seizing lands from Indigenous people and from systems of stewardship and collective care and pulling them into a colonial system of private property, which prioritizes individual wealth and ownership over that collective care. And what we're seeing is kind of this inevitable endpoint, and we're seeing it across this nation and many others right now. More recently, it's things like blatantly divesting from social housing by the federal government and every level of government refusing to actually do the work to protect existing housing stock and handing things over to privatization. So that is why we're seeing what we're seeing on the ground.
All right, Anna, we'll have to leave it right there. We certainly appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day, like I said, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
A first-of-its-kind women and children's shelter is one step closer to being a reality in the Yukon. A plot of land in Whitehorse's Whistlebend neighborhood has been selected for the site of the shelter. The Yukon government transferred the plot to the Council of Yukon First Nations, who are leading the project, for $1. The 32-bed, 15-apartment shelter will include culturally relevant spaces like a wet room to process meat and fish. The shelter is set to open its doors in the summer of 2024.
This will definitely have some options that will not only make people hopefully feel at ease and help them transition through this reality that they're facing, but also give them that support and the capacity that they need, not only to make, possibly better choices for their family, but also the support that's much needed, especially when you're raising young children.
All right, it's time for a short break, but still ahead. A Mi'kmaq land-based learning camp is combining science and nature.
It's awesome. It's a lot of fun, and school's starting up soon, so it's like kind of getting back into school a little bit with getting up early and all that, and it's a lot of fun getting to know new people.
Welcome back. Two members from the World Heritage Committee are in northern Alberta and the Northwest Territories to study the federal government's actions on recommendations to protect Wood Buffalo National Park. In 2016, the United Nations operated organization listed 17 recommendations to protect Canada's largest national park. The park has been threatened with vastly decreasing water levels from industry and threats from the oil sands. The report could be ready by the end of the year.
They're going to be traveling today to Fort Chipewyan, so my hometown community, and then to Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, and touring the Peace Athabasca Delta, meeting with local land users and elders, and just basically absorbing and receiving information on the status of what is happening to manage and protect the OUV within Wood Buffalo.
A big victory in court today for Enbridge in Michigan. A judge has ruled in favor of Enbridge in its fight with the state over the Line 5 cross-border pipeline. Judge Janet Neff says the case belongs in federal court. That's a blow to Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer's bid to shut down the pipeline. It's the second time in 9 months that the same judge has sided with Enbridge on the issue of jurisdiction. Whitmer has been trying since November of 2020 to shut down Line 5 for the fear of a spill in the Straits of Mackinac, where the pipeline crosses the Great Lakes. Physics and traditional trapping are part of a new program in Nova Scotia. The Mi'kmaq land-based learning camp combines science and nature to help youth connect to the land. APTN's Angel Moore has the details.
Indigenous youth learn how to make a traditional trap, 3 sticks and a rock, and they are also learning the physics behind it. Instructor Jack Shu, a mechanical engineering student, says the design of the trap is impressive.
The design was very smart, using only 3 sticks and a piece of wood or a heavy rock. With that minimum amount of material, we can set up a very efficient way to catch prey. Myself, as a mechanical engineering student, I really admire this kind of smart designing.
The height of the trap and the mass of the rock affects how fast the rock will drop, a calculation that determines the speed of the rock falling needed to catch the prey. The one-week camp, called Two-Eyed Seeing, has 15 youth participating. It combines Indigenous knowledge and Western science. The hope is that these kids will take a serious interest in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Angelo Masking, 15 years old, hopes to return next summer.
It's awesome. It's a lot of fun, and school's starting up soon, so it's like kind of getting back into school a little bit with getting up early and all that, and it's a lot of fun getting to know new people.
Riley Goodwin, 13 years old, is learning new skills.
If you go out, like, trapping and all that, like how we're learning to do it right now, it's pretty fun.
A collaboration with Alnueg, a non-profit organization dedicated to the success of Indigenous communities, and Supernova, a Dalhousie University initiative to promote science, engineering, technology, and math to youth. Holly Griffiths, Director of Education at Alnueg, says,
So it's two-eyed seeing. It's essentially, looking at Western sort of science and using that lens, and then also taking Indigenous traditional knowledge and ways of knowing and using both of those viewpoints to look at the world and to study and to learn. So.
The land-based learning camp is held at Windhorse Farm, about 100 kilometers west of Halifax. With 200 acres of land with an old forest, the youth identify and calculate the age of the trees. Candace Lane, 16 years old, enjoys the outdoors.
Sometimes it can be even better than just the normal school setting, just sitting in a desk all day. Just connecting with like nature and other people.
The rest of the week will include more cultural activities, such as basket making and a water ceremony. Caitlin McPhail, Supernova coordinator, says not all youth know about their culture.
And so this is a really special week for them to be able to come here and have those cultural learning opportunities while being around other youth who are like-minded and who are also here to learn and eager to experience and explore and learn more about their culture and who they are and where their place is.
The hope is youth become interested in a future in STEM and the program offered in communities year-round. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Windhorse Farm, Nova Scotia.
All right, it's time for one final break, but when we come back, healers, medicine people, knowledge holders, and elders are in Treaty 4 territory for a traditional health and cultural gathering.
It's events such as this that, first of all, may provide opportunity for families who are going through the situation to come together and to have access to cultural and spiritual support.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. APTN News' very own Jason Kershane submitted this photo. While on vacation in Alberta, Jason traveled with family to Lake Louise and sent us this memory. It's a great shot, Jason. We want to see your amazing photos, and you can easily email those photos to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 23 in rain in Charlottetown and 24 in St. John's. 21 in Happy Valley Goose Bay and 17 in Cartwright. 25 in showers in Quebec City and 30 in Montreal. 29 in clear in Sarnia and 28 in North Bay. 21 degrees in Wawa and 26 in Sioux Lookout. 26 in Churchill and clear in 25 in Norway House. 25 and clear in Barons River and 24 in showers in Winnipeg. 30 degrees in Swift Current and 30 in Saskatoon. 30 and clear in Buffalo Narrows and 30 in showers in Stony Rapids. Making our way west, rain in 31 in Fort Chipewyan and 31 in Peace River. 29 in Edmonton, and 30 in Calgary. 24 and some showers in Vancouver, and 25 in Campbell River. 19 in Prince Rupert, and 28 in Fort Nelson. 21 degrees in Whitehorse, and 18 in Old Crow. 18 in showers in Norman Wells, and 24 in Fort Simpson. 13 in Fort McPherson, and 9 in Inuvik. 25 in Baker Lake, and 20 in Arviat. 10 degrees in Arctic Bay, and 8 degrees in Clyde River. Healers, medicine people, knowledge holders, and elders are in Treaty 4 territory for a traditional health and cultural gathering. They're sharing teachings that organizers hope will preserve and revitalize the traditional way of life. APTN's Leanne Sanders has the story.
Treaty 4 territory is the ancestral home of the Saulteaux, Cree, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota peoples, and home to this week's health and land-based cultural camp for youth. Knowledge is being shared on how to tan hides, make hand drums, and pemmican, but also on how to maintain a healthy life and stay safe. Erica Bowden is a Cowasis band member and has been an advocate for the vulnerable for the past 20 years. She was asked to speak about missing and murdered Indigenous people.
It may not seem as though an event such as today could be considered a prevention or an intervention measure for someone who is missing and murdered. But in actuality, it's events such as this that, first of all, may provide opportunity for families who are going through the situation to come together and to have access to cultural and spiritual support. Events such as today are actually very integral to the calls to justice that were given for the National Inquiry in terms of the revitalization and the reclamation of who we are as Indigenous people.
Organizers say the wisdom that elders and knowledge keepers share is a safeguard for First Nations dealing with the effects of racist colonial policies, residential schools, 60s scoop, and the child welfare system. The week-long camp wraps up on Friday. Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. For all of us here, thank you for joining us. Miigwech, and have a great night.